So I've gotten several emails from folks who are out. Little sickly feeling this morning, so I imagine we've got about all we're going to probably have in here this morning. So there's a few things that I want to talk about. Probably won't go the full time today, which I'm sure is not a sad thing for you all. Maybe you can get back and catch up a little more sleep. So the first thing that I want to talk about is we're in November, as you all are aware, and that means what's coming up? Christmas. Finals. Finals are coming up, right? And there's not a break anymore between now and then, barring some sort of disaster, which I hope doesn't happen. But we're out of hurricane season, so I doubt that's going to be the case. So, how many of you have comprehensive finals in your classes? Many of you do. Some of you probably may just be your last exam, right? So, you all need to remember that finals don't necessarily meet at the same time as your regular class time, right? There's a final schedule, so make sure that you look at that. And I mention that because every year when I teach a big class, I have probably 3 or 4 students that miss the final because they thought it was at the regular scheduled class time. That's not the case. Okay, so make sure that you've gone in and marked on your calendars your finals at this point. Very, very important that you have that ahead of time. Okay? So, it's time to start preparing for finals even though you're not done with the semester, because you're not going to have much time after your last day of class and your first final. Right? There's a reading day. I believe that's on Friday before finals, and then you've got that weekend. That's not a lot of time. Okay? So, you need to start making sure that you're preparing for that older material that you might have somewhat forgotten. Kind of refresh yourself on that as you go, because I can tell you there is nothing worse than cramming for a final. If you've never done it, it may seem appealing, but it's really not very fun, because you all can have final after final after final coming at your way pretty quickly. So if you have 4 or 5 classes, it's possible for you to have 4 or 5 finals. Now, what's the final in this class? Anybody know? It's a trick question. There is no final in this class, okay? So the final exam time that you have slotted for this class is time that you have to yourself, that you can use to prepare for whatever you need to prepare for, okay? So this is not the kind of class that is designed to give you a big final and all that kind of stuff, right? This is a class that's trying to help prepare you to move on in your college career. So, what's the best way to start studying for finals? What are your thoughts about how you're going to study for finals? Study groups. Study groups aren't bad, right? We've talked about study groups before. Do we need to be careful about our study groups? Absolutely, right? If you all pick the people who you gravitate towards, and we all do, right? We all gravitate to people that we like. What's the danger of that in your study group?
Some of them might not be knowledgeable upon what you're not really good at.
Okay, yeah, that's right. So you definitely want to pick a study group where everybody has some strengths and you can improve your weaknesses by helping feed off other people's strengths. What else is another issue with having a lot of like-minded or people who you really like around you in a study group? That's right. You end up getting distracted. It becomes like hanging out, right? It becomes although I don't think you all probably hang out at the mall too much anymore, but back in my day, that's what we would do, right? And so that's what they can devolve into. So I'm not saying you need to go out and find people you don't like to study with. I'm just saying when you put your study group together and you put together your study group times, you need to make sure that you moderate that tendency to go down the social path. Okay, so and so heard, so and so did what. and you start all of a sudden having a talk fest, and the next thing you know, you're socializing. What would be the appropriate amount of time for a study group to meet? There's no right or wrong answer to this. What do you all think? If you were going to meet with a study group, how much time would you want to devote to that each session?
I feel like it depends on how, like, the material you go over and, like, how many people. Because, like, say my study group meets, like, once a week for 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because, like, we all have different schedules.
Okay. And you said for how many hours?
2.
Okay.
But it's, like, late, like,
In the
7
evening?
to 8.
Okay. All right. So, does anybody know what your attention span really kind of is? Huh? We're how far into the class so far? Right? Right? Your attention span on any one subject is about 50 minutes to an hour. After that, you start to, well, your brain gets kind of tired and it needs to start thinking about something else, right? So, you need to, in your study groups, if you're meeting for 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever the case may be, it's okay to set your timers for 50 to an hour and take a 5-minute break. Make sure you have time to go use the restroom. Have that little chat out for a second, but then come back and form that study group again and finish on. I think about 2 hours is about right for a study group. I think anything longer than that really starts to encroach on your time management for other things. Remember, you have multiple classes. And you're right, there are some classes that are going to require more study than others. This class requires 0 study for your final, right? So no final in here, so that's true. How many of you have classes that don't have a final other than this one? Okay. What areas are they in, if I may ask? Chemistry's not going to have a final?
So, like, your class, I say chemistry because it's all CHE.
Uh-huh.
So, like, instead of us having a final, we could have, like, a paper that she opened, like, a month ago.
Okay, which class is this?
Which class is this?
How about you?
I know this one is for sociology.
Okay.
We have a paper.
Okay, so they're doing some kind of major project paper
Yeah,
kind of thing?
instead of us having a final,
Yeah.
we would just have a paper that's due at the beginning of our time slot.
Okay, so and you're going to just turn that in on Canvas and be done with it?
Physics.
Physics doesn't have a final, huh? Huh, which physics?
The first one.
111? Okay.
There are some music classes that don't have one.
Music classes? Okay. Do they have a performance or something that you have to do, or
Like mid-November.
mid-November? Okay. All right. Okay. Well, good.
It doesn't feel like November, but it is.
It is definitely November, right? The last break that you're going to have, as you all know, is Thanksgiving, right? And so Thanksgiving, I'm kind of two minds about it, but it comes at a bad time for the semester because you'll go home for 4 or 5 days. You'll probably want to visit with family and friends, understandably so. You'll be eating good food. You'll be watching football, whatever the case may be. You'll be sleeping. And what haven't I mentioned that you'll probably be doing? Studying, right? It is good for you during your Thanksgiving break to build in a little bit of study time. And I don't mean, it doesn't have to be, multiple hours on end. Take some time during the day when you get kind of tired of the family talking about politics or whatever. Go off to the side, pull out your notes, just kind of skim through them. Don't let your mind get a little rusty, okay? So it is time to start studying for finals even though classes aren't over, so just kind of keep that in mind, okay? So I had you watch 2 videos, one called Success Myths and one called Hard Work and Effort. Let's start with the hard work and effort. What did you take from that particular video? Do we reward hard work in the world?
No.
We don't. Hard work might lead to your rewards, but we actually reward effectiveness, right? Getting the job done, okay? Now, having said all that, I think the video kind of went into maybe making it sound like, well, you don't really need to work hard. You do need to work hard, but just realize that at the end of the day, you can work hard, and if you're not working effectively, you're not going to get your reward. So why do I bring that up before finals?
I guess because like you could study as much as you want, but if like you're not studying the right material and or what you're supposed to be studying for the final,
Yep.
all that hard work would be like for nothing.
That's right. That's right. You've got to know how to make your studies and make them count, right? So think about all of the things that we talked about over the course of the semester. You all did an inventory, a strategies inventory. You kind of know what you do and what you don't do very well. You need to start reflecting on that a little bit more. You need to be building a good study strategy going into finals. Because remember, you're going to have time after finals are over to relax and do everything that you want to do. But what we need to get you to, right, is through the semester with good grades so you can move on into the spring in a good position. So don't think just sitting there in front of your book reading is going to lead to, that may be hard work. I know a lot of times I've had students that will tell me, I studied so hard for this exam and I didn't get what I wanted. Well, you've got to study correctly, right? And studying for a chemistry exam is going to be very different than studying for your sociology paper or your history paper or your history exam or whatever. And I'm not saying one is better than the other. But what is different about the science classes versus some of the other classes in the humanities?
I feel like a lot
It's
of-
very cumulative, isn't it? I mean, what you learned in chapter 1 in your chemistry class, you used in chapter 2, you used in chapter 3. It builds, it snowballs, right? And so if you have a cumulative exam, it's really all those chapters in between. All that material is going to be fair game on that exam, right? Whereas you may have a class where they say, our last class test is going to be our final exam, and there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of classes do that, but that's really not even true. Even if I said that in a chemistry class, if I said, if you were taking my organic class, the final exam will just be the last stuff that we talked about. But that last stuff that we talked about relied on everything before. You got to know stuff about the periodic table. You got to know stuff about stoichiometry calculations. You got to know something about whatever the case may be, right? A lot of different topics go in there. So it is much easier for you all to do that kind of work a little bit at a time as opposed to trying to cram before the exam. There is no way that you can cram the night before the exam and pull an all-nighter and be effective. You all might think you can be, but that just doesn't work, okay? Studies have shown that doesn't work. The next video that I had you all look at was success myths, and I kind of like that video. What was important about that video? What was the take-home message? Do we need to watch it? Probably. Let's take a look at it. Let's watch it again. And I picked it because these are two very popular scientists that you're all probably familiar with. Of course, on the left, Neil deGrasse Tyson, and I can't ever pronounce his name, Michio Kaku, I believe is how you pronounce his name. Both theoretical physicists, Neil deGrasse Tyson's an astrophysicist. He's a theoretical physicist. Both well and in the popular medium, of course. Let me stop that. Stop. Let me get the laptop PC. There we go.
Quaffed pictures into the world. Everyone in the world is apparently crushing it except for you. It's like, oh, it doesn't work like that. We put this pressure on this generation to be so perfect It's really hard to believe that you can become great.
What are you gonna do? Give up? Wrong.
If everyone had the luxury of expressing the unique combination of talents in this world, our society would be transformed overnight. Your task is to find the combination of facts that apply to you, and people will be a path to your door.
When people think of a dark horse, I think most people think of people who are successful that nobody saw coming. In our research, we actually found that dark horses are people who prioritize personal fulfillment over conventional notions of success. Those lessons end up being valuable to anybody who wants to live a more fulfilling life. And so we found 4 elements that we think together make up this dark horse mindset that allows anybody to get on a path to more fulfillment, regardless of your starting point, how much money you have, or what your ambitions are. The first is knowing your, what we call micro motives. When we tend to think about what motivates us, we tend to look at what society tells us we all should be motivated by. Universal things like competition, money, collaboration. The truth is human beings are just more complicated than that. There's also a whole bunch of very specific things that tend to be particular to you as an individual. So for example, we actually talked to people who were genuinely motivated by organizing people's closets or aligning physical objects with your hands. Like genuinely motivated. I can't understand that for the life of me. It has zero motivational push, but when it comes to living a fulfilling life, those specific motives are every bit as important as the big general ones.
I've had several people come up to me and said, "What can I do to be you?" And the only aspect of me that's really doable is I can tell you about the academic pedigree. The rest, you have to create what it is that you do best, that layers onto the formal training that may be behind it. I think the greatest of people that have ever been in society were never versions of someone else. They were themselves. You don't think about Michael Jordan, the basketball player, and say, oh, he was just like this other player. You don't even say he was like this player plus that player divided by 2 plus this. No, he's Michael Jordan.
The second is knowing your choices. Whereas we might optimize our choices against things that society tells us are important, dark horses are really fantastic at realizing you actually do have a lot of choice every day if you're looking for it.
In every industry possible, Maya Angelou for poetry, Jane Goodall for science, Pitbull, Quincy Jones, Tim Ferriss, Larry King, they all couldn't have been more different on the outside. But as I heard their stories and started to dissect how they launched their careers, I realized there was this common melody. It's sort of like getting into a nightclub. So there's always 3 ways in. There's the first door, the main entrance, where the line curves around the block, where 99% of people wait in line hoping to get in. And then there's the second door, the VIP entrance, where the billionaires or celebrities go through. And school has this way of making us feel like those are the only 2 ways in. You're either born into it or you wait your turn like everybody else. What I've learned is that there's always the third door. How did Spielberg become the youngest director in Hollywood history without a single hit under his belt? He was rejected from film school. So instead of giving up on his dream, he decided he would take his education into his own hands. One day when he was around 19 years old, he jumped onto a tour bus at Universal Studios, rides around the lot on this tour, jumps off the bus, hides in the bathroom, waits for the bus to drive away, and starts walking around the lot. And as he's walking around, he bumps into this man named Chuck Silvers, who works at Universal Television. And Spielberg tells him his dream. The next months, Spielberg goes back onto the lot, going into editing rooms, learning as much as possible, sneaking onto set and soaking it all in, really creating his own education. He's asking producers out to lunch, talking to actors and actresses, but eventually Chuck Silvers, who became his mentor, gave him one of the best pieces of advice. Stop schmoozing and go make a quality short film that you can have in your hand and show to people. And it sort of busts that myth of it's not, what you know, it's who you know. It's really also what you know, or what you have to show. So Spielberg takes the advice to heart, makes this incredible short film called Amblin. When Chuck Silver sees it, he's so moved that a single teardrop falls on his face. And Chuck Silver reaches for the phone and calls the vice president of Universal Television, Sid Sheinberg. And he goes, Sid, I have something you have to see. Sheinberg watches the film, the next day says he wants to see Spielberg immediately, and gives him a 7-year contract on the spot. And that's how he became the youngest director in Hollywood history. So the third door isn't a prescription or a recipe, it's really a mindset. And it's a door where you jump out of line, run down the alley, bang on the door 100 times, crack open the window, go through the kitchen, there's always a way in. And it doesn't matter if that's how Gates sold his first piece of software or how Lady Gaga got her first record deal, they all took the third door.
The third element is knowing your strategies. Whenever we think about improvement or achievement, we tend to believe that there's one right way to do that. There's one right way to learn math, to climb the corporate ladder. That's actually not true. For anything that you ever want to accomplish, there's always multiple ways to accomplish it.
Success in life is understanding the challenges of the future, to working out scenarios of the future. President Eisenhower, when he was a general, was asked about his attitude toward victory, toward fights, and toward war. And he basically said that pessimists never win wars. Only optimists win wars. What separates them from the pessimists? The optimists see the future, the bright side of the future that has opportunities. Pessimist simply says, can't do it, not possible, end of story, that's it, folks. You have to have not just optimism, but you have to have one eye on the future. If you want to understand the future, you have to understand science. You got to pay your dues. That's what Eisenhower can do. He could see the future of a war because he understood the mechanics of the war and how the war would progress. That's the key.
The final element for a dark horse mindset is ignoring the destination. The problem with obsessing about a long-term destination is most of that's not even in your control, right? And it takes the focus off of something you should be focusing on, which is, again, that getting to know who you are. In our society, we are constantly taught from a very early age to obsess about our sort of long-term destination. We ask kids all the time, what are you going to be when you grow up? And we kind of expect them to have an answer.
Success is not a goal, it's just an ongoing journey. In my late 30s, I had finally achieved some what society would consider successes in my career. I had led the turnaround of a $5 billion business as its president, which is obviously no small feat. And I started seeing, articles that were written that would say, she did this great thing, she did that great thing, she led this company, she's been called this in the media, she's amazing. And I literally would sit there squirming in my chair going, oh my God, no one's telling the truth. The truth is, I've had some really embarrassing fuck-ups along the way, and I think it's important to see that those who become successful have had all those moments of uncertainty, all those moments of, frankly, averageness. Every successful person in the world did not start knowing that they were going to get there. Pretty much every one of them did not start with these natural, God-given talents. It was a real story of willingness to experience and try things and then eventually figure out where you're going to thrive. And it's okay to not know where your true greatness lies, because it is a process, and I don't care which generation you come from. I believe that that path exists for absolutely everyone.
Get smarter, faster with videos from the world's biggest thinkers. And to learn even more from the world's biggest thinkers, get Big Think Plus for your business.
We have a cult.
All right. So, what do y'all think about that? What do y'all take from that?
I think one big takeaway for me is that a lot of it had to do with set for you, and that you really can't compare or like try to follow in the footsteps of somebody else when everyone's unique and everyone has a unique path.
Yeah, we don't even really know exactly where that path's going to be, do we? I mean, at this point. 20 years ago, I would have had no idea that I would have been an associate provost. I would have laughed at the idea. Opportunities arose, I took those opportunities, right? When I went to graduate school, being an administrator was not at the top of my, it never even crossed my mind. But things will materialize for you. Things will become available that you may not know, and you have to make a decision about whether or not you're going to take that door or not, and that's going to be up to you. What else did you all take from it? What's motivating you, right? What motivates you to be here, to be chemistry majors, right? It's going to be different for each and every one of you. Some of you really want to be chemists. Some of you are using the degree to get someplace else, right? You've got different motives for being here, right? But you got to understand what those motives are, right? The idea that you can do this major is certainly a possibility, right? It's not the easiest major on campus, there's no doubt about that. But it also can be one of, in my opinion, obviously I'm biased, but I think it's one of the more fulfilling majors. I mean, just think about all of the things that you can do in your future, all the possible doors that could be opened with your degree. And there's the obvious ones, medical school, law school, dental school, right? But there's also, beyond just research, you could end up working at a company that ends up making the next big thing that really changes society. All of the things that we deal with in the world, from agriculture to transportation to cell phones to technology, all rely on these things we call materials. And you can't have materials unless you have chemistry, right? You can't have medicines without biochemistry and biology, right? So there's a lot of paths that can be opened up for you with this degree that I think was one of the things that attracted me to it so early on. I didn't have a pigeonholed job prospect. You know, when I was in your shoes and I was thinking about what I wanted to major in, you know, there were several majors that when I was looking at a brochure, I thought, you know, if I did that, that's pretty much all I could see myself doing. But when I looked at chemistry, I saw a lot of possibilities. I could be here, I could be in industry, I could have gone to medical school, and that was one of the things that attracted me to the major, other than the fact that I always liked science, but it really was between chemistry and physics, and it turns out I didn't really like doing that much math, so physics and engineering were kind of out for me, and so that's how I ended up being in organic chemistry. Anything else? Why do I show you this before finals week? Shouldn't this have been something I showed you the first day of class? Probably. It wasn't available then. But why before finals week? Why would I show you something like this? Y'all are going to go home at Christmas and you're going to do a lot of thinking about things. Some of you are going to be thinking about, is this the right major? Some of you are going to be thinking about your future. Some of you are going to be thinking about a variety of different things, and you need to be thinking about it correctly. And so I thought this was a good kind of motivational piece where you're seeing people that we obviously in society would say they were successful, but they had their doubts about their success. They never really thought that they would be where they are. So I want you all to know, as you're thinking about those things, think about it in your terms. Don't think about it in terms of how can you be like Neil deGrasse Tyson or Michael Jordan or whatever the case may be, right? So that's the reason why I'm showing that to you now, because you all will be going home at Christmas time and you all will be thinking about a number of these things. I guarantee you the things will be crossing your mind. So wanted to give you that piece of advice. All right. So for today's attendance, we're not going to do anything. I need you to think about what success means for you. I think I have enough cards. So we will put your name on one side, your ID number, of course. And I want you to put on that card what your definition of your personal success is. So I want you to take a few minutes.
You mean like vaguely or like of something you've done?
Whatever you think it is at this point, what success in your future looks like to you. This is really a self-reflection more than a right or wrong answer. Right? And your future can either be relatively short-term or long-term, whatever you want to write about. Okay, last thing that I want to talk about today before you all go. I've gotten some emails about the CV resume assignment, which is due today. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to ask me any questions that you may have if you haven't turned it in yet. So are there any questions about that particular assignment?
Do we have to do a CV and a resume?
No, it's CV or resume. Okay, so right now, yours will look like more like a resume than a CV, but it will be built in a way that next year or next semester you'll add more to it, and it will evolve by the time you become a senior into a small CV. Okay, you all saw my example CV, many pages long. Yours isn't going to be anywhere near that, right? So.
I believe you mentioned it before, but since we're kind of like closer to high school, do we also include like some stuff from high school?
It's perfectly fine to include at this point stuff from high school, yeah. The only thing that you'll find from high school on my CV when I send it out, it's not actually on the CV that I provided you, but I still put on there from high school my acceptance into Boys State. So that was an achievement that still resonates today with people when you said, because there's a group of people that went, and it's kind of like a club. So if you went to, things like that, if you got to Governor School, if you went to Boys State, those things might stay on your CV for a long time. But as you get closer to being a senior here, some of that high school stuff is going to start rolling off, right? So right now, for your work experience, you might put those odd jobs that you did or those part-time jobs, right? But as you get closer and older to being a professional, those things will roll off. Your job at Salad Station will no longer be relevant to, going and getting a professional job. So that type of stuff. Yeah.
Are there any more events for the activity participation?
On Friday.
Yeah.
Chemistry seminars will keep going throughout the month.
11
a.m.
What, 11 a.m.'s got what?
A chemistry seminar. I saw a flyer for it.
At 11 a.m.?
Yeah.
There's also
This is
the
what it says.
online one.
11 a.m., yeah.
I know it was an odd time.
One of my other classes, I have to attend music performances. Can I submit one?
Yeah, you can double count it, sure. Yeah, no need in increasing the number. Yep. I think, did I put the seminar list in the Canvas show? Yeah. So, yeah, there's always a seminar, but I don't know of any other big things going on campus right now. I mean, it's kind of there might be still some plays and some music performances, but this is the season where that kind of stuff starts to wind down.
There's a symphony tomorrow.
There's a symphony tomorrow? Okay. When is that and where is that?
7:30
Okay.
7:30.
Also, like the guy who talks about rural scholarships for medical schools.
Oh, okay. The rural physician
Yeah.
scholarship? Okay. I'll count that. We're taking pictures of everybody's phones? That's funny. Are there any other questions about the CV resume assignment? Okay. Remember, that's due today by 5. Okay. My grade on that is going to be, obviously you all are unique. I'm not going to judge it based on its length unless all you did was give me your personal information. Okay. I know there's more to you than that. But I'm going to be looking at formatting. I'm going to be looking at the professionalism of the presentation. Okay. I expect each and every one of you to get 100. Okay. So just make sure, because I'll cut and paste those into Word. I'll tell it to look for spelling errors, that kind of thing. Make sure it's polished. Don't use fancy colors and fancy flair in your fonts, etc. Make it a nice, professional-looking resume. Make sure you've got your education stuff on there. At this point, if you've been actively involved in volunteerism, that would be something important to include.
So for our education, we need to include on mine I have it where I graduated from high school, and then under that it's the University of Southern Mississippi. Do I need to put under the University of Southern Mississippi I'm a chemistry major with a minor in biology with an assistant biochemistry?
Yeah, I would do something along those lines. I would put the university work above the high school work. I mean, because let's say you were going to apply for a scholarship and they ask you to give you a copy of their resume, they're going to be more interested in your university work at this point than your high school work, right? So we want that more recent relevant stuff to float to the top. Any other questions? All right, well, I look forward to looking at them. They're due at 5. On your way out on that table right there, or either one of those tables, just leave your note card with your name on it and your stuff, and I will see you all next week.